26 U.S. states have named an official state reptile. As with other state symbols, states compare admirable aspects of the reptile and of the state. Within designating statutes, schoolchildren often start campaigns promoting the favorite reptile to encourage state legislators to enact it as a state symbol. Many secretaries of state maintain educational web pages that describe the state reptile. Oklahoma was the first state to name an official reptile, the common collared lizard, in 1969. Only 2 states followed in the 1970s, but the ensuing decade saw nominations at a rate of almost 1 per year. State birds are more common, with all 50 states naming one, and they were adopted earlier, with the first one selected in 1927. Before the formal designation as state reptiles, Florida's alligator, Maryland's terrapin, and Texas's horned lizard were all mascots of a major in-state university. West Virginia's timber rattlesnake was an early American flag element dating back to 1775. Because of the cold-blooded nature, reptiles are more common in warmer climates, and 19 of the 26 state reptiles represent southern states. 6 states chose a species named after the state. A turtle was chosen by more than half of the states. In all, the most frequently chosen species, with 4 states naming it, is the painted turtle. One state reptile, the Alabama red-bellied turtle, is legally designated as an endangered species in the United States, and several others. Also, turtles are threatened at some lesser level. State reptiles. Governmental aspects. Legislation. A reptile becomes the official state symbol after it is voted in by the state legislature. Although many states require the bill to be signed by the governor, in some the enabling act is a resolution. In 2004, Illinois held a popular vote to pick the painted turtle, but legislation was still required in 2005 to make their choice official. Schoolchildren often start the campaigns for state reptiles. 3 of the 4 states choosing the painted turtle credit school classes with initiating the process. The process may require students to be knowledgeable of the selection, as was the case in Florida when students advocated for the loggerhead sea turtle. Working with State Representative Curtis Richardson, the students provided information and answered questions regarding the symbols. Quote, in New York, students statewide voted to pick one of 4 turtles. The common snapping turtle edged the painted turtle 5048 to 5005. Assemblyman Joel Miller had sponsored the turtle election to interest students in politics and said of the results, "As with every election, every vote is important. Candidate state reptiles are not assured of making it through the legislative process." In Minnesota, 1998 and 1999 bills proposing the Blandings turtle were unsuccessful. In Pennsylvania in 2009, the House passed an eastern box turtle bill which died in the Senate without a vote. Virginia proponents of the eastern box turtle have seen 1999 and 2009 bids fail. For the most recent attempt, a legislative opponent of the turtle said it was too cowardly for the state because of its defensive shell, and suggested the rattlesnake would be a better representative. The turtle also drew scorn for often perishing on roads, but its most serious problem was a too close association with bordering state, North Carolina. Justification. Like other state symbols, a state reptile is intended to show state pride. The designation has no economic or wildlife protection effect. States justify their choice of state reptiles with differing rationales in designating legislation and on websites. North Carolina selected the eastern box turtle because its behavior reflects admirable human ideals. The turtle watches undisturbed as countless generations of foster hares run by to quick oblivion, and is thus a model of patience for mankind, and a symbol of our state's unrelenting pursuit of great and lofty goals. Maryland notes its historical associations with the diamondback terrapin. Chesapeake colonists ate terrapin prepared Native American fashion, roasted whole in live coals. Abundant and easy to catch, terrapin were so ample that landowners often fed their slaves and indentured servants a staple diet of terrapin meat. Later, in the 19th century, the turtle was appreciated as gourmet food, especially in a stew laced with cream and sherry. Ohio adds the ubiquity and practical benefits of its reptile. The black racer snake was adopted because it is native to all 88 Ohio counties and is called the farmer's friend because it eats disease-carrying rodents. Texas stresses the conservation needs of the Texas horned lizard. It is perhaps most appropriate for designation as an official state symbol because, like many other things truly Texan, it is a threatened species. Use the state reptile concept serves education. Some states offer lesson plans using the reptile for teachers to introduce children to the legislative process, discuss state geography, or develop state patriotism. Many secretaries of state have a kids page describing the reptile. Some, such as Missouri's Robin Carnahan, tout state-provided coloring books. Rate of adoption and comparison to other symbols. In 1969, Oklahoma designated the first state reptile when it chose the common collared lizard or mountain boomer. 2 states followed suit in the 1970s, 7 states in the 1980s, 8 states in the 1990s, and 8 states in the 2000s. As of January 2011, 26 of the 50 states have named a state reptile. None has yet been named in the 2010s. In contrast to state reptiles, state birds have been more rapidly adopted, with the first state designating one in 1927 and the 50th in 1973. As of January 2011, other types of animals more popular for state symbolization were mammals, fish, and insects. Animal symbols less popular than reptiles were butterflies, amphibians, dogs, dinosaurs, bats, and crustaceans. In their Almanac of U.S. state symbols, Benjamin and Barbara Shearer spend comparatively little text on state reptiles. They spend a full chapter each on state birds, trees and flowers. Within those chapters, they take about a half page to describe the campaign to establish each state's specific symbol. Reptiles, on the other hand, are shown only in list format in a chapter titled Miscellaneous, where the other non-bird animals are listed. Shearer and Shearer consider the state reptiles to be part of a last 30 years phenomenon that includes such particular items as a state's official beverage, geography, perhaps owing to the greater presence of cold-blooded reptiles in warmer climates. The states in the southern half of the United States have more commonly designated a state reptile. From the 24 of the contiguous states roughly south of the Mason-Dixon line, only 5 lack a state reptile. From east to west, they are Delaware, Virginia, Kentucky, Arkansas, and Utah. In contrast, in the north half of the central and western states, only 1, Wyoming, has named a state reptile. In the Great Lakes region, there is a cluster of 3 states that named a reptile. In the northeast, there is another cluster of 3 participating states. Neither of the non-contiguous states, Alaska and Hawaii, have named a state reptile. The District of Columbia lacks a state reptile, although it does have an official tree and flower. None of the organized territories of the United States have state reptiles, although all 4 have designated official flowers. 6 states chose reptiles named after the state. In common names, Arizona and Texas were represented by the Arizona ridge-nosed rattlesnake and Texas horned lizard. Mississippi and North Carolina appeared in scientific names, alligator mississippiensis and terrapene Carolina. Alabama and New Mexico appeared in both common names and scientific names. Previous symbology. Politics. Although there is no official reptile of the United States, some of the state reptiles have had previous appearances in American politics. In particular, the timber rattlesnake has had close association with American independence. A United States flag with a timber rattlesnake predates the Stars and Stripes flag. In 1775, Christopher Gadsden developed an emblem with a coiled rattlesnake with the words "Don't tread on me" on a yellow background. Versions of the Gadsden flag were used by the Continental Navy's 1st Commodore, early Marines, and Minutemen and regular Army units in Virginia, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. The timber rattlesnake is also famous for appearing on the 1st Navy Jack, a red and white striped flag. However, although traditionally believed to have been used by the Continental Navy, recent scholarship asserts that the snake on the Jack was a late 19th century invention. Nevertheless, in 1975, the U.S. Navy brought back the traditional Jack for the service's bicentennial. After 1980, the oldest commissioned vessel in the U.S. Navy was designated to use the traditional Jack. Since 2002, in response to the 9/11 terrorist attacks, the U.S. Navy has all its ships using the 1st Navy Jack. West Virginia named the timber rattlesnake as its state reptile in 2008. A 2009 article, West Virginia's State Reptile, in the State Wildlife magazine drew a connection to the older American rattlesnake symbol. Actually, the warning on the early flags was not meant to depict the timber rattlesnake as being ferocious or the American people as being warlike. The true message was that the citizens of the colonies were a peaceable and freedom-loving people. But if England's King George III continued with his oppressive policies toward the colonies, then they would respond with great wrath. This response would be much like that of a timber rattlesnake, which is peaceable and slow to anger, but will attack aggressively when provoked and will not stop fighting until the enemy retreats. Benjamin Franklin, writing as an anonymous person, submitted the following statement concerning the disposition of the timber rattlesnake to the Pennsylvania Journal in 1775. She never begins an attack, nor, when once engaged, ever surrenders. She is therefore an emblem of magnanimity and true courage. She never wounds till she has generously given notice, even to her enemy, and cautioned him against the danger of treading on her. Quote, in contrast to the positive symbology of the rattlesnake, some political use has been for criticism. The snapping turtle was the central feature of a famous American political cartoon, published in 1808 in Federalist protest of the Jeffersonian Embargo Act of 1807. The cartoon showed a snapping turtle, jaws locked fiercely to the rear of an American trader who was attempting to carry a barrel of goods onto a British ship. The trader was seen whimsically uttering the words, "Oh, this cursed dough grabbed me." Also, during the Great Depression, the gopher tortoise was known as the Hoover chicken because it was eaten by poor people out of work. Athletics. 3 states chose reptiles that were already prominently associated with a major university in the state. Florida honored the American alligator in 1987, but the Gators have titled the University of Florida's teams since 1911. In that year, a printer made a spur-of-the-moment decision to print an alligator emblem on a shipment of the school's football pennants. The mascot stuck. perhaps because the team captain's nickname was Gator. Maryland honored the diamondback terrapin in 1994, but the mascot of Maryland's Maine State University in College Park has been the terrapins or terps since 1932. In that year, the football coach, who had encountered the animal as a boy near the Chesapeake Bay, proposed it as a mascot to oppose the Wildcats, Tigers, and such of enemy teams. Texas honored the Texas horned lizard in 1993, but private Texas Christian University has had the associated mascot the horned frog since 1896. According to legend, the football team identified with the lizards found on the practice field as the athletes and reptiles were similarly scrappy. The college founder's son, Addison Clark Jr., a faculty member and the initiator of the football team, had been fascinated by the creatures. By 1897, the lizard appeared as a logo on the front of the school yearbook, which Clark had also started and was managing. Biology. In terms of common divisions of reptiles, turtles are most popular. 15 of the 26 states give them official status. The rest of the state reptiles comprise 4 snakes, 4 lizards, and 3 crocodilians. 18 states name a reptile at the species level, 2 a genus, and 7 a subspecies. The species most frequently adopted as a state reptile is the painted turtle, with 4 states designating it: Colorado, Illinois, Michigan, and Vermont. 3 southern states, Florida, Louisiana, and Mississippi, represent themselves with the American alligator, a species of box turtle, Terrapene carolina. A common box turtle has been chosen by 3 states, with North Carolina and Tennessee using the Terrapene carolina subspecies, and with Missouri using the Terrapene carolina triungus subspecies. 2 bordering western states, California and Nevada, chose the desert tortoise. The loggerhead sea turtle was named by South Carolina as state reptile, while Florida chose it as state saltwater reptile. Florida also named an official tortoise, the gopher tortoise, the same animal as Georgia's state reptile. 4 genera are represented with different species in the list. Terrapene has Terrapene ornata along with Terrapene carolina. Under Gophorus, there are Gophorus polyphemus and Gophorus agassii. Under Crotalus, Arizona named Crotalus willardi, while West Virginia chose Crotalus horridus. With Phrynosoma, Wyoming specified the entire genus, but Texas specified Phrynosoma cornutum. Conservation. General reptile declines and state reptile examples. Writing in 1988, naturalist J. Whitfield Gibbons asserted that awareness of the conservation needs of reptiles had lagged that of large mammals and game species. However, comparison of different editions of the Golden Guide does show increasing sensitivity to U.S. reptile conservation over the last half of the 20th century. In the 2000 review article, The Global Decline of Reptiles, Déjà Vu Amphibians, Gibbons and colleagues argue that while the general public is more sympathetic to amphibians, reptile species are actually more in danger. Although populations can decline from natural causes, and it is difficult to prove the exact reason for a specific reptile's decline, human actions are behind most of the species problems. Gibbons et al. Describes 6 causes of reptile reductions, incidentally furnishing several examples of state reptile species impacted. Overharvesting. Overcollection by humans has strongly hurt many reptile species, especially turtles. The diamondback turtle, once extremely common, dropped sharply in the beginning of the 20th century because of its popularity in soup, but is gradually recovering now that harvesting for food has mostly stopped. Capture for the pet trade has been strongly implicated in the decline of box turtles. The timber rattlesnake is threatened by rattlesnake roundups because females take 9 years to mature and only produce 4 young per year. However, not all reptile usage is unsustainable. Since the late 20th century recovery of the American alligator, its numbers have been successfully managed by game restrictions and commercial ranching. Habitat loss. Gopher tortoises have been impacted by the loss of 97% of the southeast's longleaf pine forest. Introduced invasive species. New plant species have harmed the desert tortoise and gopher tortoise. Egg-eating fire ants have reduced the Texas horned lizard from part of its range. Environmental pollution. Water pollution is primarily seen in turtles and crocodilians and can affect their eggs and sex characteristics. Male American alligators have been found with lowered testosterone and altered gonads in a chemically contaminated lake. Disease. Increased disease in wild populations often follows weakening from other environmental stressors such as habitat loss. Upper lung infection and shell diseases have been implicated in the decline of the desert tortoise and gopher tortoise. Global warming represents a future threat by changing habitat. Reptiles are more unsafe than birds because they have less ability to move large distances. Gibbons and colleagues do not describe any examples of impact on specific state reptile species, although they mention a general concern for turtles and crocodilians having the populations become imbalanced. The animals' sexes are determined by temperature of the eggs. IUCN ratings. In keeping with the general issues of reptiles, some of the U.S. state reptiles are dwindling species. The International Union for Conservation of Nature maintains a system of ratings, going from extinct to least concern. None of the U.S. state reptiles are in the most extreme categories of extinct in the wild, or critically endangered. 2 species are IUCN endangered: the Alabama red-bellied turtle and the loggerhead sea turtle. However, in the United States, only the Alabama red-bellied turtle is legally an endangered species. The loggerhead sea turtle is only considered threatened under U.S. regulations. 2 species are IUCN vulnerable: the desert tortoise and the gopher tortoise. 3 species are near threatened: the diamondback terrapin, the ornate box turtle, and the common box turtle. All the remaining state reptile species are least concern. Interestingly, all the non-turtle reptiles fall into this category, but the only 2 turtles in relative safety are the common snapping turtle and the painted turtle. The tabulated IUCN ratings for the state reptiles all reflect species-level assessments. For most state reptiles, the IUCN does not discuss the subspecies situations. With the Arizona ridge-backed rattlesnake, the IUCN notes the subspecies has similar safety to the overall species, but does not formally rate the subspecies. The ratings also do not reflect state-specific population conditions. For instance, for the Texas horned lizard, much of eastern Texas has lost the animal. Nevertheless, based on healthy populations in other parts of the West, especially New Mexico, the IUCN rates the animal least concern. For the timber rattlesnake, the IUCN notes the animal as losing range in many parts of the northeastern U.S., but because the animal is numerous in the southern Appalachians, it is also least concern. The IUCN status of state reptiles at the genus level is ambiguous. For Massachusetts's garter snake, the listed least concern represents the status of the pictured common garter snake, the species found throughout much of North America and residing in Massachusetts. Within the genus, there are 23 species at least concern and 2 each at vulnerable, endangered and data deficient. For Wyoming's horned lizard state reptile, the rating reflects that of the pictured short-horned lizard, which occurs over much of the central United States and almost all of Wyoming. Within the genus, there are 10 species at least concerned and 1 at near threatened and 1 at data deficient.